I used to come all the time when it was a foundation to the Baltic Triangle. I just loved the space, the vastness of it. In fact, it was a blank canvas. There was so much potential for what you could do with the place, really. And then when that closed down, I found out that it was going to be taken over by a group of people called, wanted to call it Camp and Furnace. And they asked me to do a couple of events here, which I did with Wax. And they just got bigger and bigger. And I just loved the fact that it wasn't in town, so it was only people who had to dig a bit harder to kind of find good stuff going on, really. House started because we were looking for a venue since we started Wax, basically. We wanted the perfect place for us to do our own events as well as other people's. And after doing loads of events at Camp and Furnace, we found one down the road, and it seemed like a perfect opportunity, so we jumped at it too soon. We had no experience, didn't have a clue what to do. We were working off temporary events notices for a little while. We had to be really cautious and careful about who knew what, because obviously if people found out that we were going for a premises license, they can throw in certain restrictions and not want us to actually succeed and stuff. So yeah, it was a very steep learning curve.
We always, as a family, because we've always all been involved in youth theatre and theatres, haven't we? So we were looking for a venue. We'd been looking for quite a while, hadn't we, for a venue? Somebody phoned me and said, there's a little theatre for sale. Did you know about it? And I didn't. I'd never heard of it. So came along, I had a look at it and just fell in love with it.
An in-house company called Take a Hint. And they use the premises when it's not being used for anything else, for rehearsals and stuff like that. So we're supporting developing companies and giving them free space, basically, because it is such an expensive thing now to book rehearsal rooms. The building itself isn't always ideal or fit for purpose.
No, it definitely isn't.
But for us to move out of this area it would change. Yeah, it'd be backwards. There's no reason for us to do it. It would. There is physical reason for us to do it, but if we did it, it would take us away from what we really want to be involved in.
Yeah.
The events that were going on in town were particularly different to what we wanted to do. I guess the closest similarity was the Casimir, in that they were creating huge themes around their events and large-scale props and interactive and absolutely mind-blowing. So that's someone that we kind of always idolised, really, or a group of people that we idolised in what they did and looked up to. And that's something that we wanted to kind of recreate down here, and we felt that because these weren't venues, they were just blank canvases, we could do whatever we wanted. And that did kind of shape the night in a way, but also it's exactly what we wanted to achieve anyway. That's the whole reason we started Wax, to be honest. Yeah, the fact that it's a blank canvas often around here, and people can kind of, used to be able to get away with a little bit more than they do now. And the spaces have got much bigger ceiling height. There's just so much more you can do with them, really, compared to normal venues. Or at least that's the way it appears at first glance. There's a lot more kind of restrictions to it than first meets the eye, really.
I kind of come from Eric's, really, which was the punk club. And I was in a band when I was a kid called Big in Japan, which is the band that a lot of the people who got famous in the 80s, like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, KLF, you know, they were all in Big in Japan. So it was one of those bands that was just a little band, but everyone became really famous afterwards. And through music, really, you know, you kind of go on tour to fantastic places and you see great things. So we kind of brought that experience back to Liverpool. I got involved with the arts quite young. I was director of the Blue Coat when I was about 23, 24. Around Festival of Comedy, things like that. And then I went over to Cream for a decade, and we built the Cream brand up. I left there to set up the Biennial of Contemporary Art. I worked for the A Foundation, so we funded the biennial. And over that period, I used to open a lot of warehouses for the artists. So I kind of got interested in property and, you know, looking at converting, we used to convert hundreds of thousands of square feet for the artists actually. And then we got to the point where we realised that there was a property boom about to happen in the city. So a lot of the warehouses which had been in the hands of Liverpool people, so you'd go and ask this Liverpool person, can I rent your warehouse for 6 weeks, you know? And then suddenly in about 2002, you were going to Hong Kong banks and New York banks who'd all bought the property. So I kind of got on the fact that there was a boom happening quite quickly. It was the run up to 2008. Property was getting bought by speculators, the artists were getting moved out of the property, which I'd seen a number of times. So, you know, from starting life at Eric's on Matthew Street, which was a very derelict street at the end of the city centre at that point, you know, the developers moved in, we moved out, we moved over to the Rope Walks area before it was Rope Walks. They were going to flatten that for car parking. Cream opened, Bar opened. We brought in this out of town audience every week and all the bars started to thrive from it. And then Rope Walks development happened and everyone moved out. After the 2004 biennial, I decided that I wanted to kind of kill that cycle. The cycle was that the artists moved into areas, created activity, in cheap warehouse space, and then the developers would move in and we'd all move out, you know. So I kind of wanted to kill that cycle. And the city at that time was run up to 2008. The artists were getting thrown out of their buildings, and the city had given half of the city centre to the Duke of Westminster for £1. So that sort of gave me my leverage, and it was like, okay, if you can give the city centre to the Duke of Westminster, the richest man in Britain, for £1, you can give the artists an area where they're not going to be thrown out of, because that was the main thing. I wanted to stop that cycle. It was like, what would happen if the arts could use property development to make money and fund itself?
The Baltic Triangle began to attract businesses around 7-8 years ago. Creative digital industries moving into the Baltic Triangle because effectively the rents were cheap. At that point, the agencies sort of involved in the sector, Liverpool Vision, Acme, Northwest Development Agency as it was at the time, basically got their heads together and began to think about, you know, can we do something to stop this displacement? As values rise, can we do something to stop businesses being pushed out as rents increase? And the solution was, here in the Baltic Triangle, to grab the property. An opportunity to grab 18 warehouses in the Baltic Triangle, redevelop them so that they were specifically designed and built and let to creative and digital industries. That decision was made sort of 5-6 years ago, and Baltic Creative took ownership of the properties about 5 years ago, and it took us about 2.5 years, 3 years to redevelop the 18 warehouses, and we've been full now for 2 years. And on the back of our success here, and on the back of the success of the cafe opening up the buildings onto Jamaica Street, and obviously opening up the warehouse with the shopfront studios on Jamaica Street, that sort of provided it put sort of a face to the sector really here. Prior to that, everything was behind brick walls and roller shutters. You couldn't really see it really. On the back of that, on the back of the investment and on the back of the success of the scheme, other investment has begun to come into the Baltic Triangle. The challenge now is to make sure that the success we've had to date and the sectors that we support here, creative and digital industries, is that as this investment comes in, we make sure that it doesn't drown out the businesses that are here, really. And that's one of the challenges we've got as we move forward. But in terms of sort of why it's been successful, you know, Baltic Creatives played a role, Elevators played a role, the redevelopment of what was the old A Foundation building to you know, the Camp and Furnace venue, the women's organisation, other music venues opening in the area, Constellations, 24 Kitchen Street, all of this investment and all of this change as sort of is contributing to its success, really. And as I say, the big challenge now is to retain much of that identity and charm and connection with the sector and not be drowned out by student accommodation or residential development. That's the challenge now as we move forward.
When we first moved in here, there was that whole, everyone was saying, oh, it's like the meatpacking district in New York and it's like Hoxton. And it isn't really, but it's trying to mimic that notion of, and it is turning empty derelict buildings into something sort of exciting.
It's not quite central. Yeah. So, it, you know, because it lives on the edge, it means that you can also then not apply different rules, but the type of stuff that you can attract and that you can put on it.
But the crowds that you draw as well, you know, you've got to go out. If you come in here, you come in here because you want to be here. It's crowd
specific, and that's what's different.
You haven't wandered past the walkabout and fallen into it by accident. You've come here because this is what you're interested in. So you know the crowd you get are going to be a crowd who are a nice, interesting, creative crowd. Yeah. Basically, we exist to house new work and to give new actors, directors, writers an opportunity, musicians, comedians across the board. The artistic community moved here. All of those people who are working independently, small companies, bigger companies, were sort of forced into this area because rope walks came in and stole the artistic quarter in Duke Street. Yeah. And that is what happens traditionally. A creative community will move in, spark up an area, turn it into something a little bit exciting, and then developers and builders go, oh, that's quite exciting, let's go and buy up all the buildings.
What's happening, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it happens.
The irony of the success of Baltic Triangle, which is a lot to do with the fact that the bars and restaurants and clubs are doing so well down here. Obviously people want to live by those, but then they don't want to hear those places when they go to sleep at night. So it is a stupid irony, really. It's like everywhere. It's what happens. It's what happened to Shoreditch, it's what happened to Dalston now, it's what happened to Hackney Wick. And it's just going to move elsewhere, I would have thought. Camp and Furnace is obviously here to stay. They don't really piss anyone off. But that's because they're not doing club nights till 4 in the morning, apart from in house upstairs.
A group of people moved up here and started, first of all, the CUC, which is now the new college. They moved the picket into that building, which is now district. And she said, you know, this traditionally happens all the time. And what we want to do is protect this area. We want to say, right, we are the artistic community. We're moving in here. We're having it. It's ours. And stop developers coming in and actually make a base that people don't have to move on from every 10 years. But we set up this organisation, which is the Baltic Triangle, to protect the area, really. And they've just set up a completely separate thing, which is the Baltic Neighbourhood. They've just made a new name for it yesterday at the meeting. And there's a new sort of law where district communities can come together, set up a little group, and we can try and protect the area from developers taking over. Nobody wants to stop development. That would be ridiculous. You want the area to grow and develop. We need to be able to have some say in what comes into the district.
It needs to reflect what the area is about and what we're trying to do in the area as a collective.
We knew that we couldn't get people down here, really. You know, we focused on young people who have more limited options, and we set up the venue as a 14+ venue. And we did loads of work for the first few years just with young kids, and they were made up to be down here. In fact, I moved in, and the next people to move in were the skate park, because the kids realised, God, we could just do something down there, you know? So we spent quite a few years working with the young bands who have now become all the cool bands around town. So, you know, people like the Sugar Man and Go Fiasco, who, you know, are now starting to get deals and starting to get noticed nationally. They all started in this venue when they were 14, so to them, you know, this is home. Next year, they'll come in as artists in residence. So slowly we're moving the sort of management and the sort of ethos of the building over to the young bands, you know, so they'll move in and start doing more stuff here, and it kind of it opens up the building for young people, you know. So it's been quite a journey. Now it's getting much easier because it's the place to be. So, you know, we see the next few years as being really good years, but, you know, we've probably struggled, and I invested loads of money just keeping it going down here until we got the property. But I always was confident that once the area was up and running, it would be a great area. So I always knew that if I could trade down here for a few years, I'd get the money back. So that's sort of where we're at now. You know, we can continue trading down here, and slowly we'll get back the money that we invested in being down here. 10 years it is this month, actually, since I moved down. Eventually, the city agreed to hand the property over, and I'm kind of a deal opener. You know, I'm an artist, I'm not a property speculator, so I'm a deal opener. So a really lucky thing happened for everybody in that I got brought in to be creative director of the Year of Culture opening. So we were just at that point where the property was going to be handed over, and I went to Kevin McManus, who runs Acme in the city, and asked him to, you know, look, you just take it over for me and get this to closure. So the big boys came in a way and closed the deal, got the property handed over, and the CIC was set up. I'm a member of the CIC, but, you know, other than that, I'm just a tenant in the area now, really. I walk around with my pinny on, and, you know, nobody kind of knows the full story. But I do sometimes look around and think, God, didn't we do well? And, you know, it's important that people remember it was started by a maverick. It wasn't started, you know, as a kind of corporate arts thing. It was started by somebody who had a vision. We didn't have the money, but we had the vision, and we had the experience from working in grassroots arts. And I think that's quite important, really, because it's been so successful. It just looks like it's some sort of corporate arts development. People don't realise we started it with one building, and we slowly built up from there.
Been meeting as a group of businesses in the Baltic Triangle. Well, I've been meeting with businesses for 5 years since our company started, really. As the area's changed and as investment has begun to sort of come into the area, we're getting to see planning applications that are going to the planning authority. We as a group of businesses in the area have formed ourselves into an area company. We've got a business plan, we've got a vision manifesto. We got, you know, the website, the bank accounts. It's set up as an area company, and one of the responsibilities of the area company is trying to protect the vision for the area, really, which is all about creative, digital, industrious businesses, not just about residential. It's about the business community as well. So what can we do? Well, we can lobby, we can speak to the planning department, we can speak to local ward councillors, but more actively, I think what we can do is to communicate with that investment, really. And that's about us as an area speaking with this investment, speaking to these developers and saying, okay, do you understand the real value of what's here in terms of the economy that's here? So Baltic Creative, we're working with some developers, and we're trying to ascertain whether or not we can take ownership of their ground and first floor offers to see if we can populate those spaces with creative and digital industries, not be boarded up and, you know, be faceless, sort of blanked out sort of shops which never get occupied for 10 years. In addition to that, we're talking about neighbourhood planning as an area, we're talking about how we can, is it possible for us to develop a plan, not which dictates what people can and can't do on individual sites or land and property, but actually talks about design and the importance of good design, or talks about material specification in development to make sure that it contributes to the area and is green and is in keeping with the vision and vibe and feel of the area. Now, all of these issues can play a role in sort of contributing to the growth of the area without blindly coming in and just doing what you've always done as a developer, because that's what you do elsewhere. There's an economy here, so it's important that we share that vision with developers. It's important we share the passion for the sector here, and if we do that well, you'll find that the majority of developers will get on board with it, or at least entertain the conversation. And we're getting some real good results early in some of that. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do deals with some developers which will allow us to provide additional space here for creative and digital industries.
Yeah, we're at quite a vital point now because, the developers are moving in. For years when we were down here, sometimes we'd walk out of the door and there'd be, a big fat slick property developer in his Jag, and he'd be saying, "Hi, I believe this is the next new area," and we'd say, "Oh no, nothing happening here. Move on," And we had to kind of. We walk this weird balance of running a business down here, but trying to keep quiet about the plans for the area because we didn't want to be gazumped. So, it's going to be a balancing act now. I mean, I'm really confident because we're quite experienced and intimidating people to come up against, So, I don't believe that it will be damaging. But obviously it's going to be difficult because there's going to be flats in the area, the venue's going to get under pressure for sound and things. So what we're trying to do, on one level, we're working with the developers and we're saying, we won't go against your planning if you give your ground floor space to artists, and that way we can kind of grow the area using them. That's something that Mark's looking at in CIC, which has been really successful so far. And on the other side of things, we're bringing in people to talk to the city council to try and change the planning laws so that, there's a law in America whereby if a developer develops next to a music venue, it's up to the developer to soundproof his building and protect those residents from noise. It's not up to me to lower my sound. So we're trying to get the city to look at that, to take responsibility away from the venue and put it onto the developer who's moving in. So, there's a number of things we'll do, and I think we'll be successful. The main thing is that this property is in trust now for the artists. They own it. So, we're already running at a profit. The property is all single-story property. In 25 years' time, it will most probably redevelop and go multi-story, at which point that will bring in a lot of money for the arts in the city. So, it's the first time ever that the artists have owned an area. They can't be moved from that area, and we will make money for that arts community eventually. So, I see everyone as pioneers. Every single person who's renting property down here, they're a pioneer. They're trying something and they're part of something that has never, ever been done before. And if we can crack this nut, it will have massive impact on other areas. People are coming from all over the world now to look at what we're doing, and Mark's going and speaking in places like Vietnam, and we're just encouraging the artists to take control, get hold of that property. There isn't going to be funding for the arts in the future. Every time a Tory government comes in, it cuts the funding. So if we can set up new independent ways for the arts to make money, we've done our job really.